last half of his speech is very, very clear. He's telling people to rise up. He's also using the key words that you need under international law, which is the word imminent. You hear him at the beginning of his speech say there was an imminent threat to the United States and the United States personnel and their allies. And under international law, you are able, if you believe you've reached that test, be able to take preemptive action against someone posing an imminent threat. So he's using all the correct words that no doubt his Attorney General and his lawyers would have recommended to him to use. And indeed, it actually sets out terms that the United Kingdom could support him in a mutual defence position where we would come to the aid or support of an ally on request, which is what we've basically done in Ukraine.
President Trump has confirmed that the US is involved in major combat operations in conjunction with Israel against Iran. Speaking on Truth Social, President Trump explained the threats from Iran and they are striking them and they're trying to stop those threats.
The United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world and attack our forces and no longer use their IEDs or roadside bombs, as they are sometimes called, to so gravely wound and kill thousands and thousands of people, including many Americans. And we will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. It's a very simple message. They will never have a nuclear weapon. This regime will soon learn that no one should challenge the strength and might of the United States Armed Forces. I built and rebuilt our military in my first administration, and there is no military on earth even close to its power, strength, or sophistication. My administration has taken every possible step to minimize the risk to U.S. personnel in the region. Even so, and I do not make this statement lightly, the Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission. We pray for every service member as they selflessly risk their lives to ensure that Americans and our children will never be threatened by a nuclear-armed Iran. We ask God to protect all of our heroes in harm's way, and we trust that, with his help, the men and women of the armed forces will prevail.
Well, that is President Trump speaking in a long 8-minute video on Truth Social, which he posted in the last half an hour or so. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defence Forces are reporting that Iran have now launched missiles back at Israel. Let's speak to Ben Wallace, former Conservative Defence Secretary and former chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Iran. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming on. First of all, your reaction and your assessment of what is unfolding.
Well, first of all, this has, I think, been brewing for some time. But I think a lot of us in the West were probably guessing whether this was going to actually result in what we're seeing unfold at the moment. I think President Trump probably started this with the ambition of saying to the Iranians, we could do all this, we'd like a deal. And, you know, he is the famous deal maker in his mind. And I think clearly he's got frustrated with the Iranian regime. My understanding was actually this was originally authorized about last Friday, so just over a week ago, he finally sort of said, yes, go for it to some extent. But I think his speech is very telling in what he's trying to achieve.
And do you take that as being regime change?
I think I do. I mean, the last half of his speech is very, very clear. He's telling people to rise up. He's also using the key words that you need under international law, which is the word imminent. You hear him at the beginning of his speech say there was an imminent threat to the United States and the United States personnel and their allies. And under international law, you are able, if you believe you've reached that test, be able to take preemptive action against someone posing an imminent threat. So he's using all the correct words that no doubt his attorney general and his lawyers would have recommended to him to use. And indeed, it actually sets out terms that the United Kingdom could support him in a mutual defence position where we would come to the aid or support of an ally on request, which is what we've basically done in Ukraine.
So is your assessment then that this is legal action?
Well, I haven't seen all the obviously the very current intelligence, but any country, it is open to a country to defend itself under international law if it is under imminent threat. Now, given there are so many Americans in the region, given the direction of travel of the Iranian regime over the last few years, and I've been quite strident about the UK's potential ability to support. We've seen death squads in the United Kingdom. We've seen Iranian assassination squads in the United Kingdom targeting Iranian dissidents, media outlets, etc. in the last few years. If there is that imminent threat, then of course that leaves it open to the policymakers, that's the politicians and their military personnel, to take that next step.
And so do you think that the UK will get involved in this and should get involved in this?
I think that is for the United States to lay out its evidence to the British government of today, to Keir Starmer and the Defence Secretary and the Attorney General, and say, we believe this was an imminent threat. And then we would like your support. And I think that will go on obviously in secret because it will rely on intelligence. So I can't make that judgment. I can say that the direction of travel of the Iranian regime has got worse and worse since the years when I was chairing the Iran group. The hardliners have basically held the upper hand in Iran now for very many years, both in the Majlis, the parliament, and the IRGC has got ever more under the late General Soleimani, if you remember, the man who was killed, I think, during the first Trump administration, has got more and more both powerful and deadlier with its proxies against people that it views to be allies. And that has led Iran to this position where it's being run by the hardliners and the IRGC. The real question about Donald Trump's speech, however, is he seems to be very clearly indicating a regime change desire. If the Iranian government of today believes it's got nothing to lose, and if it believes that America's aim is regime change, then I think its retaliation will be worse and wider than it would if he thought it was like last time, which was about curtailing the nuclear program.
And therefore, what are the implications for the region?
I think for the region and the wider world, actually, I think, first of all those US bases, very, very near. I mean, within sight, you can literally see Iran from the banks of Qatar. You can see, Oman is close. Obviously, Bahrain, all those other Gulf countries are very, very close. Iran's proxies in Yemen, the Houthis that are there, for example, and they've previously attacked our friends like Saudi Arabia. You also see, obviously, Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, some of those have been downgraded by Israel's actions about 18 months ago, and some of them haven't. But no doubt Iran could do what it's always done, which is restrict flow of oil through the Straits of Hormuz, literally close that down, sow it with mines, for example. And if it does that, then certainly us in Europe will feel the very high cost of fuel prices.
Why now?
Well, according to Donald Trump, they weren't coming to do a deal. They kept changing their mind. They said they wanted one, and they didn't. There definitely was a real concern the first time we had those military strikes against the nuclear facilities that Iran really was getting towards the ability to have a nuclear weapon. I'll leave it at that. The UN inspectors just towards my time found very high grades of enriched uranium, I think over 80%. Now, your viewers, for your viewers' knowledge, that if you want to do an X-ray in a hospital, the radiation level is about 2 to 3%, maybe up to 20 at the most for civil purposes. The only reason you would have enriched uranium at 80% is because you were heading towards that 90% levels that you need for a nuclear weapon. Now, the Iranians said, it was a mistake. I don't think people enrich uranium by mistake. And I think then we saw the Americans and Israelis take action last time. I think maybe America believes that they are heading towards doing even further damage.
If the US and Israel are successful in what you believe in, and many people are asserting to be their aim of regime change in Iran. We know history tells us that regime change brought on by Western governments in that region is not particularly successful. Just lay out for us the potential dangers for the Iranian people, for the region, for the wider world.
Well, the potential dangers have already recently been demonstrated, very sadly, which was the uprising recently by peaceful protesters in Iran has reportedly led to over 16,000 of them being murdered by the security forces of Iran. The Iranian regime isn't like other regimes. It has had, 40 years plus of knowing how to oppress its own people, how to control them, how to disappear them in the middle of the night, etc. And they have a huge number of people engaged in that. You have not only the IRGC and the intelligence services, but you also have the militia, the Basij, which are a bunch of sort of brown shirts, if you want to compare them to the Nazi era, who go around, acting on behalf of the leader. They often a bit more dedicated, but less educated. And we used to see them being sort of trucked in to throw stones at the British embassy when they didn't like what Britain was doing, but they also can be unleashed against their own people. So the dangers are the Iranians rise up and are brutally suppressed by a regime well practiced in it, and that the United States doesn't follow through, or anybody follow through, on its declaration. You can't just encourage people to rise up if you haven't equipped them or trained them or supported them in its purest form, if that's what you were going to do as a country's ambition. I'm not saying that is anybody's ambition other than I think the verbal statements by the United States, but in the past, regime change is usually achieved by enabling the opposition as well as encouraging them. But also, you could see it. I mean, the Assad regime basically collapsed out of nowhere in Syria. I don't think anybody in the West and the intelligence services or anywhere else sensed that collapse that happened so quickly. We've got our own experiences of the end of the Cold War in the 1989 when the wall came down. It seemed that everyone suddenly missed that collapse. There is a tipping point when a population can, but this is a well-rehearsed and brutal regime that is well used to suppressing these type of uprisings in the past. It just depends how far the United States are prepared to go.
And briefly, Ben Wallace, because we are running out of time, but I'm very grateful to you for coming on this morning. What are the chances of boots on the ground?
I think minimal with the United States president, as we've seen. You might see some special forces, I don't know, but I think the assessments are always, if you really want to destroy their weapons program, their nuclear program, if you really wanted to do something different, you'd have to probably put people on the ground. But, the precision, the use of intelligence, the use of proxies, which we see Israel do incredibly successfully. We look what they did to Hezbollah with the pager attack a few months ago, where they literally took out most of Hezbollah's capability for a period of time. A lot of those things are possible, and Israel has shown its ability to hit right at the heart of the Iranian regime. So those things can be done. We'll see it yet again. War is always about the next war rather than the last war and how you fight it. I think we should have a lot of thought, however, to our allies in the region, because they will be the first and foremost. They'll bear any brunt of retaliation. Yeah. We shouldn't forget there's a lot of British interest and allies in that region. A lot of people work, including myself, in that region. A lot of people go there. And the airbase that was hit last time by Qatar, by the Iranians in Qatar, that's a multinational airbase. That's an airbase that we have used. Britain uses it. European nations use it in the fight against ISIS. And I remember when I was Defense Secretary, the Iranians killed Lance Corporal Brody, or their Shia militia in Iraq killed Lance Corporal Brody when she was on an airfield in northern Iraq. And the Iranians have that ability. And so, Britain needs to be on its guard, needs to be on its alert. But it also needs to consider whether it's going to play its role in supporting the United States and any other allies, including Gulf allies, who may come under attack.
Ben Wallace, thank you so much for your time today, former Defence Secretary.